Real Chat, episode 25, Mad Max 2.
This is what it has come to.
Look! Out there! They're coming back! Come on! Move it!
Here is where it shall be decided.
Here it is. Greetings from the Humongous.
In a world without gas.
The Humongous rules the wasteland.
I'm gravely disappointed that you wish to take the gasoline out of the wasteland.
Defend the fuel.
We'll never walk away.
Give me the pump, the gasoline, the whole compound.
This is a land that prays for a hero.
Well, if anyone's going to get in there, it's going to be you.
This is Mad Max 2. Max.
It's a long time since I've seen driving like that, man.
The warrior of the road.
You're okay by me, pal.
Gotta hand it to you, Treasure. The last of the V8 interceptors.
Every day we get weaker while they get stronger.
You want to get out of here? You talk to me. Now, to do the job, I need some high-octane gasoline. Got yourself a deal.
You can run, but you can't hide.
You gonna crash or crash through?
I was wrong about you. I'm sorry.
When it's every man for himself. And there's no place left to run. When all that's left is one last chance. Pray that he's still out there. Somewhere. Mad Max 2.
Just one man can make a difference. Everybody, welcome to episode 25 of Real Chat, a podcast that promises week in, week out, the real world as we know it. Today we're looking at 1981's Australian post-apocalyptic action sequel, Mad Max 2, an Ozploitation picture also known as The Road Warrior or Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, renamed for North American distribution because at the time, the original Mad Max had only been released there on a limited basis. So calling it Mad Max 2 would have confused viewers. Mad Max 2 epitomizes the term cult film, with fan clubs and Road Warrior themed activities continuing long into the 21st century. This film redefined how car chases could be photographed and edited in the same way that Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns reconceived the choreography of gunfights. And of course, it made the bankable movie star out of its lead actor Mel Gibson, whose career flourished for over 30 years before its recent collapse after repeated and well-documented personal transgressions. My name is Adam Stolfo, and I'm joined here by co-host Brose Avard. Brose, how you doing?
I am very well. I purposely didn't watch this film until after we'd done the Mad Max episode, and I'm glad I held out. And this is everything that I remembered this film to be. This is the franchise. This film is phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. And over here as well to my left, Mr. Andrew McCaskill. How you doing, Andrew?
Yeah, good, thank you. Been looking forward to this one for a while because it's up there with one of the great Australian films, if not the greatest Australian film.
There you go. And welcome back as well to good friend Matthew O'Neill. Matt, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Good to see everyone's wearing arse-less chaps as well. So it's a nice touch.
Arse-less chaps, not the most sensible pant to wear on any given day, but when you're riding a motorbike in a sandy environment, you're just asking for trouble.
Discomfort.
Really,
really, yeah, lots of discomfort. This is an episode of our Vintage Vault retrospective series, a conscious effort to tie in selected shows with something of relevance to the present. And with a fourth entry in the franchise, Mad Max Fury Road, currently in release and racking up amazing numbers at the Australian and international box office, I'm sure you'll all agree there is no better time to delve headfirst into the Mad Max franchise. I know that Andrew over here has seen the film, and I've found out that, Brose, you still have yet to see it. Is that right?
Yet to see Fury Road, that's correct.
But what about yourself, Matt? Have you yet?
Still haven't. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, well, I've seen it. I'll leave my review for when we look at that film, of course. But yeah, I think this film we're about to look at, Mad Max 2, is definitely my favourite of the series. I haven't rewatched the third one yet, but I have seen it before. I remember not being a big fan of it, but excited to talk about this film today. So what are some of your initial thoughts on this second one?
One of the great things about this film is what all sequels should aspire to be, and that is to take the idea of the first film and expand it in a way and take a good idea and create a great universe from it all without getting ridiculous, without going overblown. And also, so this film kind of moves direction. It's not a little independent kind of exploitation film anymore. There are still elements of exploitation in it, but it's now like a fully fledged action film. We've moved on. There's a big space of time between the first and second films, which means we don't get bogged down in a lot of the detail of the previous film. And I think that really helps this film along now. It's created its own universe with not as many echoes of current day like the first one still has, and just really nails it. Does a great job.
It does. Matt?
I just think this film's fantastic. I think, like Andrew said at the start, it's quite possibly the best Australian film ever, just behind Muriel's Wedding. I think... it's a post-apocalyptic Western, isn't it, really, set in Australia? And as a Western fan, I love this film to bits. So
cool. Andrew?
Yeah, the great thing about this film is it's creating a genre as it's going. Like there's been nothing. It's kind of that leather Western sci-fi kind of mesh of things going on there, which is creating a whole genre which would become quite popular in the future. And it's just so fresh and innovative.
I think the most remarkable thing about this film is just how simple it is when you try and break it down. Its story can be summed up in a sentence. Gasoline is scarce and everyone wants to get their hands on a big supply. It could have been gold in the Old West or water in the desert type of film, but by making gas the essential resource that everyone needs to survive, Miller and his co-writers Terry Hayes and Brian Hannant ingeniously transformed the thrill of speeding down the highway in the original Mad Max into a fight for survival. In Mad Max 2, the hero drives like a bat out of hell because he has to stay ahead of the pursuers trying to steal the very juice that powers his own vehicle, and speed and life are one and the same. So I think that's quite ingenious about this film and how it's taken the themes of the first one and sort of just really simplified it and just made it like a real survival story. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's also very relatable for those that don't remember. In the kind of 70s and 80s, there were often petrol strikes, and quite often petrol was hard to get and it was a rare commodity, even in what we would deem modern Australia. So I remember as a kid, there were some days where odd-numbered number plates could get petrol, and the next day even numbered number plates could get petrol. This was a very real challenge, I guess, in the 70s and 80s in Australia, that you couldn't get petrol. So even though it seems quite far-fetched now and it's a weird idea, and even though it seems like something that's going to happen in 100 years' time, this has already happened. And especially to people that went and saw it at the cinema at the time, they'd just been through petrol restrictions and the scarcity of petrol. So it's a really nice element to tie in to a film. And kind of gives it its relatability, even though now it seems quite fantastical, I suppose.
Indeed.
That element.
Mad Max 2 is a Kennedy Miller Productions release. It was released on the 24th of December 1981, Christmas Eve. How's that?
Wow.
Yeah, that was in Australia, and the 21st of May 1982 in the US, so about 6 months later or so.
That's pretty good for an Australian film to be released within 6 months from Australia to America. That's a pretty good turnover.
This was the film that sort of got Mad Max into the States as well, isn't it? Because the first film didn't even get any sort of coverage
and
until this one.
Very limited release for Mad Max, and then it was re-released after this film.
And that's why it's called Road Warrior over there, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's just like they've started fresh. So
that's it. What did they end up calling the first one?
Mad Max.
Just Mad Max,
okay, right. The film was shot primarily in New South Wales in Australia, around Broken Hill and Silverton, to be a little bit more specific. One of the factors which led to the using the location was the prediction by rainfall charts that there would be virtually no rainfall during the shoot. But of course, ironically, during the shoot, it did rain. The first time it had rained in over 4 years, apparently, and production was shut down for over a week.
And that's one of the reasons it's been purported to why Fury Road was shot overseas, is that they wanted to shoot in Broken Hill. Broken Hill had been in a drought for a ridiculous number of years, And just as they were looking at locations and looking to settle in Broken Hill, they had their first rain to break the drought, and everything was too green and lush, so Broken Hill was knocked on the head.
Yeah. The budget was significantly bigger than the first film at $2 million, the most expensive Australian film produced up to that time. And it grossed $10.8 million in this country, and then $23.7 million in Canada and the US.
Wow.
I couldn't find any specific worldwide figures. They really did sort of isolate it to these key markets, but that's definitely a massive hit for a $2 million movie.
That is extraordinary. Yeah, that's massive.
Yep.
So it made how much? 10 million in Australia?
10.8 in Australia.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We spoke about him in quite a bit of detail on our original Mad Max episode, but George Miller obviously returns for this one. Following the release of Mad Max, George Miller received a number of offers from Hollywood, including one to direct First Blood. Did you know that, Andrew?
No.
Yep. However, Miller instead decided to pursue a rock and roll movie under the working title of Roxanne. After working with writer Terry Hayes on the novelization of Mad Max, Miller and Hayes teamed up to write Roxanne in Los Angeles, but the script was ultimately shelved. Miller then became more intrigued with the idea of returning to the world of Mad Max, as a larger budget would allow him to be more ambitious. Making Mad Max was a very unhappy experience for me, said Miller. There was strong pressure to make a sequel, and I felt we could do a better job with this second movie. And they do.
Yeah, from the very start, it's the confidence and there's a real focus with this film and a strength of storytelling. The historical pieces that they weave in, and then it launches straight into a car chase. You know, straight away. There's no even start of that. There's no reason for it. It's just hell from the beginning. And you know, civilization has degraded even further, and the world is kind of gone. And it's just all these crazy maniacs on the road. It's just such an exciting opening to a film.
There's nowhere near as many buildings in this movie as there is in the first one, is there?
Well, there's none. There's just the construction, isn't there?
It's completely gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just wiped out.
Quite a powerful image.
I guess they do set that up, though, because the little settlement that is the focus of attention, they're drilling oil there, and the idea being that they're out in the middle of the desert where they've found oil. So there may well be buildings still around that we're not... You know, they do position it quite well, I think, there too. But it's a great way to do it, focusing on that little area of land. It's magical.
George Miller was also involved in the writing of the film, along with Terry Hayes and Brian Hannant. Hayes was originally a journalist who worked for a time in New York. He met George Miller when he did the novelization of the script to Mad Max, which we mentioned before. He and Miller got on well, and the director subsequently hired Hayes to help on the script for Mad Max 2. And then he went on to become an in-house writer for Kennedy Miller, working on the scripts for all of their subsequent miniseries. And he also wrote the script for Dead Calm.
Wow, there you go, yeah.
Which I didn't know until doing this research.
And that's a great little script too. It's really, really well shot, but a really tight script.
And he moved to Hollywood after that. And in 2001, he was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award for Best Screenplay for his work on From Hell.
Oh, yeah, the recent From Hell?
Yeah.
That's
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, Robbie Coltrane, and
that wasn't a bad film, was it?
It's not a bad. It's
a horrible adaptation.
The book is better.
The cinematographer of the film is Dean Semler. He wasn't the cinematographer on the first one, was he?
No,
so
it's David Egby.
Over.
And yeah, what a great choice. I mean, he's now considered one of the go-to guys for westerns and, you know, outdoor filmmaking. He shoots landscapes like no one else on widescreen, and this film looks amazing. It's just so beautifully
composed. Great on Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's
looks
really
amazing.
Because I'd never seen that in HD before, and it was like watching it brand new for me.
Yeah. Well, this film is almost looks like a graphic novel. Like, it's just the way it's framed and lit. It's just like panels from a comic book. So it really comes into its own as a series. And he went on to do the third film as well, which also was beautifully shot. So he really, I mean, not to take away from Egby, who amazing. We've already spoken about him in the previous episode, but it does take it up a notch with Semler.
There's a weird little story that Miller tells about, basically saying that no other cinematographer was available in Australia at the time of making this film, and Semler was one of only two guys he could get his hands on. And then Semler came in and botched the whole interview, and then Miller went on to look at a short film that he'd made and, you know, realised this guy was a genius. But it's kind of a weird backhanded compliment to kind of go, I couldn't get the people I really wanted, and this guy was, and then I saw it, but then he was blown away by his work. So yeah, it's kind of a weird story that Miller still.
Well, I think
kind of
was Razorback before this film? Did he shoot Razorback before that?
Yeah, wasn't Razorback? Is it late 70s Razorback, or was it?
It was late 70s, early 80s. I would have thought, and that is a beautiful looking film.
That's the thing with this film is, this was 81, is that right?
Yeah.
It looks so 1985.
Yeah.
Like it looks like Mel Gibson.
Razorback's 3 years after this film.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Well, Mel Gibson just looks like the Mel Gibson that goes on to become a huge star, and it's just 2 years after the original Mad Max.
It's remarkable.
He looks like a kid in that.
And we talked about that during the Mad Max podcast, that he looks so young and innocent. He's 23 in that film, and he's 25. But he looks like Riggs. He looks like it's just the Mad Max we know in the Hollywood blockbusters.
They've just gone up so many gears for this film, and getting back to the cinematography. There's one shot in particular near the end when they're just all chasing after the truck, and the captain's on his helicopter bike, and then the camera's further back, and you just see, and everyone's actually there driving these vehicles on the desert, and that just wouldn't happen now. It would just be CGI. But he's actually capturing that happening. It just looks like crazy, so much fun. It's fantastic.
Yeah, getting back to that idea that Andrew mentioned of the comic book panels, it's remarkable how much is in camera. So when Mad Max is up on the kind of the hill looking down into the settlement, and there's the cars driving around, the fact that they found a location where they could shoot all of that in camera. There's no effects, there's no green screen, there's no CGI. Everything's there. Whereas now, the hillside would be in a studio and you'd be looking down into a green screen, and same with that big truck sequence. It's just nice to know everything was there and everything was shot for real, and then everything
for real,
is so beautifully composed within each shot. The kind of the dead trees and logs on that hillside that the gyro captain's chained to, and everything just is so well composed and then well framed in the shot. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the iconic cast from Mad Max 2, starting with the man himself, Mel Gibson. He's obviously playing Max Rokotansky is his surname, apparently. I don't know if that...
Where's that listed in the adaptations, in the books?
I'm not sure, but that's his surname, Rokotansky, because he's never mentioned...
He's mentioned in the first film, one, I think. Yeah.
Right, okay. So he's a former member of the Australian Highway Patrol called the Main Force Patrol, or the MFP. The events of the first film have sort of transformed him into the embittered, burnt-out shell of a man, which he gets referred to as. So, what do you guys think of Mel Gibson in this one, maybe even in comparison to the first one?
I think this is his greatest performance. Basically, I just
Hands down?
I think so. Because it's so minimalist. It's so... He says maybe half a dozen...
16 lines of dialogue in this film.
And he carries the film. His charisma carries this film, and he's just that true antithesis of a hero. He's just kind of this laconic guy who's just under extreme amounts of pressure, but he just takes it on, and he's just this beaten up guy who just kind of gets the job done. I just think it's such a great heroic performance.
Yeah, there's only few actors who can kind of pull off that kind of the kind of role that he has in this, and Clint Eastwood and Steve McQueen maybe, just that silent, cool, brooding. Doesn't have to say much, but shit's gone down, and he does it really, really well. And I love even just the little leg brace he's got on, which harkens back to the when he injured his leg in the first one, and just all the little touches. He's apparently cut his own hair for the filming of it, so it looked like as you would when you're just driving around trying to save petrol, even though he's driving around. Doesn't make sense, really, does it? But it's still it looks fantastic. So I think this is. I'm not sure if it's his greatest performance. Braveheart's pretty good, but.
He's extraordinary. It's great, and I think it's he has that charisma on screen. You're drawn to him every time he's in the frame. He's effortless.
A bit more confident in this one as well.
He's a lot more confident, definitely, and that reflects well on the character as well. And it's those moments where we're just not saying anything, but you know what he's thinking. And I guess he's a very one-track minded kind of guy, but it works really well. And considering that the character is essentially quite selfish, he still manages to perform the character and still have some empathy. We still have empathy for him.
In America, the trailers,
Mel Gibson was a no-name.
Unknown.
He wasn't
featured. Wasn't the push for the Road Warrior. And apparently this is his favourite Mad Max film out of the three that he did as well, which is not that surprising.
It's not surprising. Really. This is the best.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Fury Road yet, but I don't imagine it's better than this. But this is the best film. Mad Max's on song is more mature and he's more confident, and the script serves him really well.
So that leads us on nicely to Bruce Spence.
I love Bruce Spence. Bruce Spence, who's a New Zealander, actually. He is one of my favourite local actors of all time. He showed up on the TV in the 80s and in film in the 80s all the time, and in this he is the right balance of kind of wacky and crazy and Just
He's just a wanderer, isn't he?
he is a wanderer, and
Yeah.
it's like what's that great line? It's I trained that snake, so I'm eating it. Like he's just absolutely brilliant, and he's quite noble in the end in this film. But God, Bruce Spence, and he's so gangly and tall. I love him. He's just a great actor.
He's a big reason why this film works.
Oh, absolutely.
He has that light touch, which just is needed sometimes, and it's just that quintessential Australian-ness.
He's quite happy as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
He smiles all the time.
A lesser actor, with those horrible teeth. A lesser actor would have made a really cheesy go at this, but he does. He brings a lot of humanity to it. Yeah.
Oh, there's so many great moments just when the dog's holding the trigger, it's just wide up the trigger, and he sees the rabbit out the window, and just his comical performance, just his eyes just kind of darting around. It's just brilliant.
It's great. Even down again to his costume, like he's got like purple shoes and yellow pants, and
the costume is extraordinary.
It's compared to the black leather of the Humongous his crew, and then the white of the guys in the refinery. That it's really different, and even just his development, the character's development is really interesting, and I like the touches, like he's got his underpants over his, like he's a superhero almost. Like you know where he's going. I mean, he can fly as well. Like it's really clever. I think that he's great.
Michael Preston plays. Is it Papagallo? Is that how you pronounce it?
That sounds good. Papagallo.
Yeah, Papagallo.
Delicious on a pizza.
Yeah. The idealistic leader of the settlers in the barricaded oil refinery. How do you guys feel that he does in this film?
It's an awkward one for me because he's not in it much.
No.
But he's quite a significant character. The script probably doesn't serve the character quite as well as it could, but he brings a nice element to the character. He's quite noble and patriarchal and quite strong still. But I don't know. When I watched it this time especially, I kept waiting for that character to pop up, and it just took longer and longer than I thought. And because it is quite significant in that little settlement, but he does a great job with it.
He's believable as a leader, definitely. I think he's got that kind of
very
pathos.
A lot of pathos.
Not sure what the point of his presence in the final chase was, apart from just getting killed leaving himself very vulnerable.
I think that is the point.
He's just driving along the truck and just kind of, I don't know, being moral support. It's not really, he didn't really do anything, but...
it is bizarre.
It's a bit of a waste. Like he could have aided them in some way, but
let's get on to Vernon Wells.
Yeah, the big show.
Wells plays
Cheeks.
Wow.
He doesn't appear in Fury Road because even if he did, you wouldn't recognise him after all the surgery he's had. But
tell me about it.
Vernon Wells is brilliant. He's menacing. He's ferocious. He's angry. Like he's so good in this film to the point where Humongous is almost irrelevant. Like Wes could be the leader of that gang. I don't know. Humongous doesn't add anything for me.
He's one of the last ones to cark it as well, isn't he?
Yeah, which we'll get to. But Wes is great. Like Wes is a real throwback to Toe Cutter and really kind of gets us back into that, because he's in the opening sequence, of course, but really gets us back into the Mad Max universe with that kind of, and he's got the androgynous partner on his bike, and that is Mad Max, that character, and I love him in this. I think he's fantastic.
Toe Cutter was such a great villain. And I don't know how you could better that, but then this guy just adds this just crazy, unpredictable, he's just such an angry spirit in the film.
And you can tell that things have moved on from Toe Cutter's time, and Toe Cutter might not have been might not have survived in this environment where it is all about anger and about violence, and Wes is just ferocious. It's great. I really love it.
I'm going to make a mention of a supporting cast member, which is the Interceptor.
Of course.
Which
it's gone through some changes since the first film.
It has. What are some of the changes that you noticed?
The barrels on the back, definitely. The inside's all kind of ripped out and a bit shithouse now, and it's all dirty and grotty and smashed up a bit. In the opening sequence, it loses its front bumper and then it reappears for some reason. But that's
as a big fan of the in the cheesy 80s action series Knight Rider. I know that Knight Rider started about a year after this film. I can't help but make the correlation with the Hoff, the leather jacket with the black Pontiac Trans Am.
Yeah, it's just
with
the
references with this film.
Because
as someone who did watch Knight Rider a lot when I was younger, I can't help but make the connection with this film with Mel Gibson there in the black leather jacket with the black iconic car.
I think I said it before as well, though. I think there's a strong influence between this film and Terminator as well. I think Mad Max has influenced James Cameron, at least to a degree, even to the point where towards the end of this film we have the battle-damaged Max, where his face has been shot at or been whatever has happened there.
Yeah.
And then similar to what happens to the end of Terminator with Schwarzenegger.
There's another reference as well, Brose, which you wouldn't have seen yet because you're one of the few people who haven't seen Titanic.
That's correct.
Old Rose at the end of Titanic makes a direct reference to the last line of this movie.
And the Road Warrior. That was the last we ever saw of him. He lives now, only in my memories.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Cameron is a fan of Mad Max.
Definitely. He said that it's a big influence on the Terminator and
the Titanic.
Yeah. But it's just an interesting move. It's an interesting film to actually make reference to a line from one of his inspirational films from the past. Yeah. So, any other members of the supporting cast that you guys want to make mention of?
The dog.
Oh, the dog is phenomenal.
As far as dog actors go, I'm pretty sure Scooby-Doo's CGI. We're all agreed on that. Yes. This dog is amazing.
Like, the great thing about this dog, they rescued it from a pound weeks before shooting, and the trainer basically went through the pound. There's this little game that the trainer plays to try and pick the right animal, and played the game with the dog, and it responded so well they knew that it would be able to be trained for the film. So it's not a 10-year working dog. It was rescued and then trained for the film.
Yeah,
and it is extraordinary. You're right.
It's amazing. Like, it even does things like there's the bit where Max wakes up and he starts eating the dog food, and like the dog looks to the captain, glances back to Max, glances back to the captain again, and then this is what actors do. This is not a freaking dog. It's amazing.
I watched something recently. I can't remember what it was now, but there was a dog in it, and the dog at one point rushes towards the actor. You can see that the dog is actually running towards the trainer, and then at the last minute the actor grabs it, but it still wants to keep going, and then by the time the actor's grabbed it, the dog kind of refocuses. So you can see that it was obviously trained and a bad performance, really. So then to watch this film after only seeing that recently, it's like the dog performance is extraordinary.
It's
so
the best performance by a dog ever. I'm going to say it
even
now.
better than the dog in Red Dog.
I haven't seen that.
That dog's pretty good, but that is several dogs.
Action.
That is several dogs. That's right.
It's fantastic.
And apparently, a lot of the engine sounds from the vehicles upset the dog as well. And in one incident, actually caused him to relieve himself in one of the cars. So you know what they did? They actually fitted him with special earplugs so that it wouldn't upset him so much.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then he was adopted by one of the camera operators after the production.
This is one of those dogs that went to live on a farm that actually ended up going to live on a farm. So as opposed to that being a euphemism.
Yeah. And I find the scene where he carks it up quite upsetting as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think as soon as you see the dog with him, you're like straight away, please don't kill the dog.
Yeah,
because you can tell it's Max's only mate. You know, Max. This dog is what everything that
people.
Max wants.
People, you know, when it comes to animals,
you're not supposed to kill the dog.
And when Max jumps on the dogs, they're about to kill the dog, and when he's in the compound, and he just throws himself at the dog.
Yeah.
It's quite a moving moment.
So, what are some of your favourite scenes in this film, guys?
Originally, for me, because I mean, obviously, rewatching it for the podcast, I hadn't watched it for a few years. It's always been that scene with Humongous outside the oil refinery. You know, talking on his... Does he have a microphone or whatever?
Yeah, he has a microphone.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, he has a microphone in the first sequence, and then later on, he
talks real loud.
And it's the same voice as if it's coming through a microphone, but he's not holding the microphone anymore. But yeah, in the opening, the first sequence you're talking about...
that whole scene with the feral kid and the boomerang, I know that used to be the standout scene for me.
I love that scene.
Yeah, but now, I don't know, there was just... going back through it, there's just so much more, and...
I think any scene involving the feral kid is quite a highlight for me.
The feral kid's such a great character, and it's a weird character to write into a film, and like Burroughs, it's just dug its own tunnel and
doesn't talk either, does he? Just makes animal
no dialogue.
Noises,
it just makes animal noises.
And it's a great performance again. Like the kid is just so I don't know. He lights up the frame when he comes in, and the relationship with him and Max is just really quite sweet.
He does talk at the start, doesn't he? He's narrating. I mean, that's a great performance by the kid.
Yeah, I know. Because he sounds about 40 or
exactly,
like that's
so knowing.
It is a great sequence. The opening sequence for me is really good because the opening sequence, it as reflections of the original film, it gets you back into the universe very quickly. It shows you the changes between the last film and this film. I find the little montage at the start of the first film unnecessary, and it was a lot longer than I remembered.
Well, that's all that's tying it to the first one, isn't it, really? It really is one of those things that's been tacked on. I love it. I like it, though. I like it, you know, how it's like it was running out of oil, so people were talking, and then they all buggered off down to Eagle Leather and got her into bondage gear and started driving around the car.
You're right though, Bruce. It is very long. I noticed that. This time.
And who knows? I guess if I hadn't seen Mad Max recently and jumped straight into Mad Max 2, maybe I would have appreciated it more. But I just found it long and frustrating. But once we get into that first little chase sequence, and that was really
the finale action scene is a highlight as well. And there's no doubt that Fury Road is hugely inspired by that sequence, isn't it?
Yeah,
Andrew. So.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But the thing about that scene is how real it is. Just how friggin' dangerous. I marvel every time I watch it.
Although that sequence was shot, it was performed at a slow pace, and then the film was sped up, so it's not as fast as it looks in the final.
There are some shots that are genuinely at real time, like just when cars like bumping into the side of the truck, just like driving into it.
The truck's kind of eating the front of the car and everything. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's getting
metal on metal,
cleaned up with the car and connected, and it's just like, how do people not die on this fucking film?
There are some interesting filmmaking techniques in this film. Speeding up the footage is hilarious when they do that.
Yeah,
because it's quite a bit, isn't there?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that throughout.
There's a lot of wipes for transition of scenes. So it's it's pretty good.
I love the sped up film. Like, in a lot of films it looks bad, but in this film it just gives it this really weird, wacky kind of element that just adds to the danger of the film.
I love it with the feral kid when he catches the boomerang.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't really need that normally, I guess, because he's still going to catch the boomerang, but it just adds like a sci-fi element to it or something.
Although Max is a likeable character, in the film he's portrayed as self-centered and is only out to do things to benefit himself. The opening narration indicates that the death of his wife and child has changed him dramatically, and he clearly prefers to be alone. It is never suggested what his role is, other than travelling the wasteland. Even though he does come across quite heartless, in this film, and the following film, Beyond Thunderdome, he does show signs of his past self, such as the connection to the feral kid. So there's something there. There's enough there to get us invested. But it's interesting about how much we associate with a character that really is quite self-centered. I guess we all just go along with the fact that we'd be like that too in this world.
I think Mad Max is one of the most fascinating cinematic characters because it's such a pure idea, and throughout all the films they've maintained that character. They haven't sold out that character at all. He's always been in it for himself, and he just found himself in these situations where he has to help people. Like he's kind of almost a bit player in his own film, which I just think is such a great idea.
Yeah, that he's just coming upon a scenario and then influencing it.
It's not his story.
Yeah, it's not his story. Yeah.
And Fury Road does that too.
Very much so, and I love that. A lot of people thought that was really weird. Essentially, it's Charlize Theron's film in a way, but that's Mad Max for you. And I think the American counterpart would maybe be John Rambo. Like, I think that character is their version of Max in a way.
Agreed.
And another great character in film.
Well, I would say Clint Eastwood. I mean, this is basically a fistful of dollars, isn't it? He's just descended upon a town or a settlement in the West, and he's kind of forced into helping them. It's
like a thankless hero, really, isn't he?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I almost found him liking the feral kid is because the feral kid can't talk. He thinks, you're awesome. Yeah. Same with the dog. You don't have to talk.
Yeah, right. And it's funny then that he comes across the gyro captain who just talks too much as well.
Because I think that if you're an American watching this and you haven't seen Mad Max, and this is just the Road Warrior, it's not even, like you said, it wasn't even advertised as Mad Max 2, it's the Road Warrior. You're just thinking of all those characters. You're thinking of Clint Eastwood or Django or whatever, and this is just a hard ass who just wants to be left alone and do his thing.
What do you guys read into Max's iconic outfit in this film? As far as Max's outfit goes, it is heavily modified from the original leather uniform he wore as one of the bronze policemen in the first film. Each alteration to the outfit has actually got its unique origin. The sleeve of his jacket is missing since he had his arm run over in the first movie, and medics would have cut the sleeve off rather than remove it by pulling it over the injured arm. I love this stuff because I've actually
thought that's gone behind it
through.
Yeah.
His leg brace is due to his kneecap being shot through by Bubba Zanetti in the first film. His spanner and tool harness is for running repairs on the V8, and his driving gloves are missing the fingers on the index and middle finger on both hands, and this may be so he can easily retrieve and load shotgun shells. Cutting the fingers off the gloves would be easier than repairing any of the holes. I love it when they go into this sort of detail and justify not only why he's in this outfit, but why there's these alterations to it.
Well, I think the costume design in this film is fantastic. Like they've gone up a notch again, and it's almost like a sci-fi kind of edge on things here. It's kind of quasi-futuristic kind of look to it, especially the oil rig community. You know, they've kind of got the white. They're all in that kind of white with the shoulder pads, and they kind of have that kind of weird 80s futuristic look about them. And then the bikers have this completely just black. It's evil versus good. You know,
it's like as soon as the apocalypse hits, the only stores that you go and hit first are Bunnings, Rebel Sport, and Eagle Leather. That's it. That's all you need, and you're set for the apocalypse.
That's it.
And apparently Norma Morrico, who was the costume designer on the film, had very few limitations on how to design the film's unique outfits. So she was given a lot of creative freedom, which is really cool. Why does Max help Pelagalo's people in the end of this film?
I think it is slightly self-absorbed, like, because his car gets trashed, he's got nothing else. You know, I'm sure that there's a good in Max, but ultimately he does it because he's got nothing else. And he says, there's a line saying, "I've got no choice," in the film, and I just think that's great because it's not really what you want your hero to say, but you know, that's Mad Max.
Yeah, he's cynical because the Interceptor was destroyed. Definitely. Yeah. And he realizes if he doesn't drive the tanker, he'll be left behind to the mercy of the humongous dogs of war as well. I think that plays a big part in it. Yeah. But now, how do you guys do you read that in a similar way, or?
Yeah, I just because his car's been trashed, it's like almost revenge for it, I guess. But he obviously warms to the Papagallo, and I mean, between the two groups that are there, it's definitely the one with the brighter outlook, isn't it, than the Humongous. I mean, they're just a bunch of arseholes, really. What
do you guys read into what happened to Max between Mad Max and this film?
I don't think there's anything really to be read into it, hence just that tagged on start. I mean, he's gone mad, isn't he? He's Max, and he's actually really mad now. He's angry. He's obviously clearly just wants to live out the rest of his life by himself with a dog, I guess, and that's it. It really is a standalone film. I don't think you need the backstory, just as we don't need the backstory.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The thing
Clint Eastwood or
the mad part of Max, like it's a bit strange. Like I think he's obviously mad and completely lost connection with humanity. That's the mad part. He's never really angry though, is he? He's always very composed,
distant,
almost burnt out to the point of caring. You know. So the mad part is always interesting. You never see any rage, like, you know, a Martin Riggs kind of scenario where he's always...
Well, we think you're going to touch on it at one point there with when Papagallo starts talking to him, after they've been attacked and saying, well, we've all got our stories, what's yours? But, just when you think he's going to open up, we get nothing.
He's quite restrained, really.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So.
It's really interesting.
I guess in the first film, he's only mad for the last 15 minutes or so, and he resolves things very quickly and very succinctly and uses that anger to seek his revenge. And in this film, I guess, once he agrees to drive the truck, I guess it's his, you could argue it's his anger that's pushing him through, and which is, it's his anger that's making him seek that, the revenge and then to defend himself as well. But he's not cracking the shits aggro like he's been pulled over for drink driving by a police officer and spouting racial hatred. Definitely a lot of that kind of man.
That comes though. That'll come soon.
That comes, yeah.
Just a little bit of trivia here from Mad Max 2. According to trivia book movie Mavericks by John Sandys, one of the more spectacular stunts in the film was actually a serious accident. One of the motorcycle riding raiders hits a car, flies off the bike, smashes his legs against the car, and cartwheels through the air towards the camera. This was a real, genuine accident. The stuntman was supposed to just fly over the car without hitting it, but the near-fatal incident looked so dramatic that it was kept in the movie. Surprise, surprise.
If you were the stuntman, you'd kind of want it left in too, wouldn't you? Have you got it on film? Yep, well, put it in, you bastard. It nearly killed me.
Take me to the hospital.
Yeah, take me to the hospital.
The stuntman broke his leg badly, but survived. If you look at the stuntman's body frame by frame through his cartwheels, you can see that one of his legs is bending at a slightly unnatural angle around the knee. And I did check this out just because of when I read this as well, and it's tough to watch. The tanker roll stunt at the end of the chase was deemed so dangerous that the stunt driver was not allowed to eat any food 12 hours before they shot, in the likely event that he could be rushed into surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
Good luck, mate. No expense with these stunt guys.
Action.
I thought they were just worried he was going to crap himself, and it's hard to reset for a retake.
This is so far from the other truck driver in Mad Max.
Yeah,
offered him $50 to drive over a motorbike. Yeah, no, it's...
Gee.
Contributing to the cost of production was the most expensive set ever constructed for an Australian film, the desert compound built in the desert of Broken Hill, New South Wales. The production also boasted the largest explosion ever created for an Australian film, which destroyed the entire set.
And then they had to alert airlines that they were going to set off the explosion in case jets passing over top either were affected by it or were reported as some to the police or something.
Imagine the pressure on like the camera team and that. Like,
so much pressure.
You better not be able to film.
And
or
the other
something.
thing too is, I mean, the luxury now, especially with shooting on digital, but the luxury now is you can have multiple cameras and you can budget your film so you can afford a certain amount of days with multiple cameras. Whereas in 1980. There wouldn't even have been more than 12 of these cameras in the country, I'm sure. And just to have 3 of them on the one location or however many they had to shoot, that is just an amazing
explosion
effort.
Doesn't look very well safety orientated.
No.
It looks like if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you would have got some shrapnel on your head because there's just shit flying everywhere and it just keeps on falling from everywhere and it just looks like the most dangerous thing ever.
Yeah, it does. It looks ferocious. It's great.
You just know you're not looking at a visual effect.
Yeah,
that's the awesome thing.
After Mad Max was finished and before that film's release, all the cars were supposed to be destroyed, including the black Interceptor. But someone thought the Interceptor was too good to lose, so they saved it from the Crusher. When the sequel was put into its planning stage, someone found out the Interceptor had somehow survived, so they tracked it down and brought it back.
That's awesome.
And look how iconic it is.
So there is a Mad Max museum in Silverton, mainly using things from Mad Max 2, and he has a bunch of the cars. So he's got the Interceptor, and he's got the other Falcon or the other Ford that's the Humongous's Ford, which looks similar to the Interceptor. He's got that as well. He's got a bunch of the Jeep-looking things. He's got one of the police cars, I think, from Mad Max 1 as well. It's phenomenal. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's the only reason I think to go to Silverton.
This was established only in 2010.
Yeah, it's quite
only
recent.
5 years ago.
And the guy had some of the stuff in storage. Is that the idea? And then he thought, why not put it out there?
Adrian and Linda Bennett developed the museum after moving to Silverton and building a collection of Mad Max props and memorabilia. Yeah, it's have you seen this, Andrew?
No, I'd love to go one day. That'd be
Absolutely,
awesome.
you will.
Oh, yeah, it'd be great.
Where's Silverton?
It's near Broken Hill. So it's
Broken Hill's
New South Wales.
New South Wales, right, cool.
Kind of west.
You haven't seen it, have you, Brose, this museum?
I've seen it. I haven't been there, no, but I've seen it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a hell of a pilgrimage. It's a hell of a way to go. And I know my brother, who's a massive Mad Max fan, I'm sure it's on his agenda. He'll be going. So it'd be phenomenal. It'd be great to see. And the Interceptor is on display, or a copy of the Interceptor is on display at Acme still at the moment in Melbourne as well.
Originally, this was the conclusion of the Mad Max story, which Max's fate would never have been revealed. And George Miller, Terry Hayes and Byron Kennedy had no intention of making a third installment. However, George Miller had planned to make a post-apocalyptic Lord of the Flies film about a tribe of children living in the wild who are found by an adult. When Miller was suggested that Mad Max is the adult who finds the children, it became the third installment, Beyond Thunderdome. You quite like that film, don't you, Andrew? So you don't sort of like wish this could have been the end of Mad Max?
If it was the end, it would have been an awesome end. You know, like it didn't need another film, but I'm grateful there is one because the third one has some great elements to it, which are worth seeing.
And here's the last little bit of trivia here as well. Because it was filmed out in a remote region in the Australian outback, the production team would have to wait 2 to 3 days before they could get to see the dailies.
Isn't that amazing? You're going to shoot all this amazing stuff that you probably can't reshoot anyway because it's so, destructive and unique, and people are getting broken legs and might have to go into surgery, and then you don't know if it's worked for 3 days. That's intense.
Isn't it? Amazing.
It's phenomenal.
Let's talk about the DVD and Blu-ray releases of Mad Max 2. I'm just going to go straight to the 2007 Blu-ray release, and then that was reissued with a brand new transfer in both 2013 and also this year, obviously the tie-in with the new film. I rediscovered this film on the Blu-ray format. I haven't seen it I don't even think I've seen it on DVD.
Yeah, probably on TV.
So I reckon on TV or even on VHS tape or something. So it was like a whole new discovery to see. It's like I was watching the film all fresh and seeing all the detail, not to mention the widescreen image. That's how long it's been since I've seen it.
Yeah.
So it was a whole rediscovery of it, and it's amazing. It looks incredible, doesn't it? You just picked them up recently, didn't you? Yeah.
I bought there's like the trilogy pack, and it's really good value. It's like $20 for the 3 films. And yeah, I've watched the first 2 so far, and both look spectacular, just really nice and clean. I mean, obviously these films are very roughly made and in tough conditions. There's a lot of grain in some very low light scenes in the film, but it all adds to the texture of it.
There's not much on the disc in regards to supplements. You'd really hope that a film like Mad Max 2 would.
It's a shame, but apparently the commentary is quite enjoyable. Have you heard that one?
The commentary is with director George Miller and cinematographer Dean Semler. Is that good, Russ?
Yeah, the commentary is fantastic. What's great about it is that these two guys haven't worked together since Thunderdome, and they obviously don't hang around as mates, but they obviously have a lot of respect for each other, and they were good friends on set. So it's a nice little reunion for these two guys to start with. So the energy is infectious. So even though it's not the most precise commentary, and there are times where they fall silent, or there are times where you think they've run out of things to say, the energy between them, and you can tell how much fun they're having watching the film again, is really good. And they're very complimentary of everyone that they worked with on the film. So you still get that sense that everyone really, knuckled down and made this film happen, and it was the involvement of everyone there, and these guys reflect that really well. And then there's some really great trivia that Miller peppers all the way through it, things that he remembers as he's watching it. So even though it's not the greatest commentary content-wise, you really get into the idea that these two guys are great mates, haven't seen each other for a long time, and are really enjoying watching this film for the first time in a long time, and sharing that with us. So it's really tasty. It's really nice. Yeah, there is that balance of the anecdotes of how the film was put together in a more colloquial sense, but then Semler is quite technical with the different lenses he's used and the different shots he used in terms of, like that beautiful shot overlooking the compound and the types of lenses and things that he used to do that, and how he, how much light he let in.
Oh,
things like
that.
Yeah, in terms of a cinematographer commentary, there's some really nice technical elements with it in as well.
Old school.
Andrew, let's talk about the soundtrack and score to Mad Max 2. Brian May's returned, not that Brian May.
No.
So what can you tell us about the music?
How good is it? I love it. It's just so much a character of the film. I mean, it was really effective in the first film, but there's more to it in this film. There's a lot more of a orchestral grandness to this one.
It appears to be there the entire time almost. It's almost like your Star Wars character in the film, isn't it?
And it just propels everything forward. There's just so much kind of muscular kind of horn blasts and drums and rhythm to the score, which is drives the action piece along, but there's a really elegant kind of almost classical piece that opens the film, over the monologue at the start. It's just this really tragic kind of theme that comes in, and obviously it's Max, the new theme for Max, and it just gives it a timeless quality which the first film didn't really have. The first film was more just like direct action, and this film just has a real grace. The score has a real grace to it in this film, and a sadness to it, which I think really adds to the film.
Yeah, all the comical kind of music stings that we get in the first one, and the Halls of Justice notes and all that kind of stuff, that's all been thrown out. But I think it's good. I think it respects the tone of this film and the score. Like, you wouldn't think it was the same guy. He's matured a lot, obviously, as a composer, or he had these talents and didn't get to express them in the first film, and it's just extraordinary. It's as good as a score can be.
And how menacing is the villain music?
It's ferocious, yeah.
And
the action sequence at the end, and it's dripping. It's great.
There's one main release of this score, isn't there?
Well, you're very good at this part of the podcast, Adam. So I'd like to take it over to you because you're all over it.
There was the original Varys Sarabond 9-track release of it,
which I would say is the definitive release. Is that the best one? Probably the best one.
Clearly has everything, doesn't it?
That's got everything. It's all there
on vinyl.
Including,
it was released on vinyl.
You've heard this?
Yes, I have. I have heard it.
How about this last track? Sound effects suite.
Yeah, odd choice, and exactly what it says on the title.
Yeah. You don't see that often on. You know what? I don't think you see that often enough on soundtracks.
Yeah, not enough.
I mean, it's definitely one of those super nerdy things. But we're going to look at Terminator 2 soon. That's so iconic for the sound effects it uses. The little sound effects suite for that film would be amazing. Star Wars has iconic sound effects.
Well, you get the Feral Kids boomerangs swooping noises in this recording. Yes. So rest easy.
You sound a little bit cynical about it, but I'm bloody excited.
And there is an expanded bootleg. I mean, I'm not surprised this came out, considering that the original release is only 9 tracks. It's like 21, featuring extended and alternate cues previously unreleased, as well as more of the original score. There's so much music in the movie. I'm not surprised that this found a way out, even though it's not official.
Yeah, no, it's an exhausting listen. I mean, it's just away from the film. It's just this propulsive, non-stop kind of energy. And I mean, you got to just admire it for its craftsmanship. Sadly, he's not on the third film. Maurice Shah takes over in the third film, but we'll talk about that when we get to it, because that's also a great score. But Brian May, it's probably his most most celebrated score.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about alternate versions of Mad Max 2, because there is a number of different versions, and it would have taken me quite a while to research all of them. Lots of different cuts, with some of them really small, others adding other bits into it. But there was the lost 1984 TV version. Did you guys know about this
what was
version
altered
at all?
for that?
In the middle of the 80s, Mad Max 2 got edited into a special version for TV. The first channel which aired this version was NBC, and later the Australian network 10 as well. This version is censored in nearly every scene containing violence, but offers different camera angles and complete alternative scenes which are unique in their own way. Now, this is not the version that we're getting on the recent Blu-rays and everything like that.
Have you seen this version?
No.
It's not on YouTube or anything?
Oh, it probably is.
And does it change the tone of the film at all? Does it change
It's just really interesting to see alternate, you know, you remember when we did Ghostbusters, Brose, and we had all those alternate versions without the swearing? And
yeah.
They used to do this in this era. They don't do this anymore.
The VHS era, this was, it happened all the time.
Yeah, and the TV edit is apparently quite different because it's nowhere near as violent.
How do they get away with doing that? Like, you'd think George Miller would be ropeable that someone's fucking with his film.
But they're using George Miller's rushes to re-edit the film, aren't they? Because not all of those get developed fully. Or printed fully.
Maybe they made a special alternate TV cut. Maybe that was part of the deal.
I'm sure with lower budget films, if you could sell the TV rights in 1981 before the film was finished, then you've got that extra money to play with in the production of the film. So,
and I think that the version that we're all watching now as well, because a lot of this stuff has become a lot more lenient, like over time. But I think we're all watching the uncut version, or an untampered with version, which actually has more violence than the original version that people might have seen when they saw it at the cinema back in the early 80s. Apparently there's several more seconds of Wes pulling the arrow out of his arm, and a few more seconds of Wes's partner lying on the ground with a boomerang embedded in his head, because they're iconic images, but apparently they're added to the movie since the original theatrical release, and that's the version that we've all seen on the recent Blu-ray.
And there's the shock of the bloated body falling out of the truck. There's some really gruesome moments.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a number of different versions of Mad Max 2, but I think that we can all agree that probably the version that we're watching now on the recent Blu-rays is the complete uncut version, most violent version.
So that's what we want.
Collectibles.
Let's talk about toys. Well, actually, here's the first thing I was going to mention when I was looking into it. And this is something I recommend true fans should do. You can still buy an XB Falcon, which is what the car the Interceptor is. You can buy one in pretty good nick for around $25,000. So if you are a true believer in the Mad Max franchise and you love this film, go and buy an XB Falcon and turn it into an Interceptor. That's my advice. Just don't stuff around with replicas and plastic and die-cast rubbish. Go and make your own bloody Interceptor. That's commitment, my friend. And it's not like if you want to make Ecto 1, it's going to cost you $300,000 to buy the car in the first place. Or if you want to make a DeLorean time machine, it's going to cost you about $150,000 just to buy the DeLorean. That's reasonably affordable. $25,000. Go and make an Interceptor. Do it. I dare you to. There were novelizations for all three of these films as well.
There was.
I haven't talked about novelizations in the collectibles segment before, but I think we had Beyond Thunderdome novelization at our house growing up. So not only were they released, the novelization for Mad Max and Mad Max 2 were released in 1982, and sold very well. And then they were all re-released in 1985 when Thunderdome came out as well on the back of that. So people probably have these floating around the house. And there wouldn't be many novelizations for Australian films, I wouldn't have thought. I can't think of... Crocodile Dundee didn't have a novelisation. So yeah, you've probably had one of those floating around at some time, and they're kind of nice little elements.
I think Matt's got the novelisation of Hotel Sorrento. It's not lying around somewhere.
I've heard that. I have Picnic at Hanging Rock.
So moving on from that, I mentioned these in the last podcast. A company called N2 Toys released Mad Max 2 figures. They also did Matrix toys around the same time. They did the first lot of Matrix toys in 2000. And I've got some of these toys in storage somewhere. There was Series 1 and Series 2. So in 2000, Series 1, they released Max and his dog, Max and the Feral Kid, the Warrior Woman, Humongous, Wes, and the Gyro Captain. I've got Max and the dog, and I've got the Gyro Captain.
Does the Gyro Captain come with his helicopter?
It doesn't, but we'll get onto that again in a second. Series 2, which was released in 2001, there's a Max with his shotgun and gas can. There's a Bad Cop, which is one of the characters in Humongous's team. The Golden Youth, which is the blonde guy on the back of Wes's motorbike. N2 Toys then went out of business. They disappeared. I don't know what happened. I don't know if they were bought out by somebody or the license lapsed or what happened, but the company went under. But they did have prototypes for toys they were going to release in the Mad Max line that didn't happen. So there was going to be a scale version of the Interceptor, so the action figure would fit into the Interceptor. There was going to be Gyro's Gyro, so the helicopter was going to be released. Wes's motorbike and then Humongus's truck were all planned, and the prototypes are online. And they're also going to do 12-inch figures. Now, back in 2000, 12-inch figures weren't as big as they are now. Hot Toys obviously leading the charge, and a few other companies make 12-inch figures, but back then 12-inch figures weren't really, that popular in terms of mainstream collecting. But yeah, they were going to be 12-inch figures. Warrior Woman, Mad Max, Humongous, some of those guys were in that line. The other great thing about this film was a massive hit in the United States, and it was a massive hit kind of in toys. It influenced a lot of other toys. Tonka released a line called Steel Monsters between 1986 and 1987, and Steel Monsters are steel Tonka truck type toys, but they're all a bit rough and kind of thrown together looking like the vehicles in Humongus's group. So there is a pickup truck without the cabin on top, so you can just have that little windscreen like is in Mad Max. And then Matchbox in 1987, 1998 released a series called Road Blasters, which again were little Matchbox cars, again influenced by the vehicles that were in Mad Max. Let's move on to Auto Art. Auto Art do die-cast replicas of vehicles. They released a scale 143, which is Matchbox car size, Interceptor, and the Black Falcon, which is the other Falcon that's on the Humongous' team. They released the 1:18 scale Interceptor, which costs between $300 and $400 if you want to buy it. It is exceptional. This is a gorgeous vehicle. It is the Mad Max 2, so it's got the barrels on the back, and it's a little bit scrappier, and it's got the dirt up the side of it. This is a beautiful vehicle. It is absolutely extraordinary. The other thing I looked up while I was looking up things for Mad Max 2, there was one version of the Mad Max Interceptor, the original film Interceptor. It was released by a company called DDA, which is an Australian company from what I can work out. The only other thing I could find that they've released is the VF Valiant from Nick Giannopoulos' The Wog Boy. Is that the weirdest collectible you've ever heard of?
Wow.
Did anyone buy it?
So they do the Interceptor and they do the Wog Boy's Valiant. It's so bizarre.
That is weird.
It was limited to 1,200 pieces, and it's very collectible now. And it was at a weird scale. It was a 1:24 scale. So it's a very bizarre scale, not a very common scale at all. But it's still a nice piece, but it's not as great. So they're the collectibles that are out there at the moment, and it's quite phenomenal the way it influenced pop culture, this film, especially in the States. And you could argue things like Mask, M-A-S-K, is kind of influenced by Mad Max as well. And it was kind of an overreaching influence in pop culture and children's entertainment from this point.
Was Mad Max 2 the film from the franchise that got the most attention, collectibles-wise?
Definitely. It's the Terminator 2 of Mad Max. It's by far more. There's no action figures for the original Mad Max, and there's only one replica of the Interceptor from Mad Max. Okay. And Mad Max 2 gets all the attention. Mad Max 3, there's very little as well.
In regards to the awards for Mad Max 2, it had no Academy Awards or nominations, no Golden Globe Awards or nominations.
But it's a good film. Shock horror.
Yeah. But in Australia, of course, at the good old AFIs in 1982, it's won quite a few. It won Best Direction for George Miller, Best Achievement in Sound to the Sound Team, Best Achievement in Production Design to Graham Walker, Best Achievement in Costume Design to Norma Morrico, and Best Achievement in Editing. And there were apparently 5 people credited with editing this film. So it won all of them. And it was also nominated for Best Original Music Score for Brian May and Best Achievement in Cinematography to Dean Semler. And then, Brose, what's the awards that we give a shit about
here?
The Satins.
Hit me up with some Satin action, man.
1983, obviously the year after it came out in the US. Okay, so it won the Best International Film, which is great. And it was nominated for Best Actor, Mel Gibson, Best Supporting Actor to good old Bruce Spence, Best Director to George Miller, Best Writing to Terry Hayes, George Miller and Brian Hannant, and Best Costumes to Norma Morrico. So it did pretty well. A lot of nominations there. Yeah. The Rotten Tomatoes website certifies Mad Max 2 fresh with a score of 98%, 41 positive and 1 negative. Now, Mad Max 2 received positive reviews and is regarded by many critics as being one of the best films of 1981. Film critic Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 3.5 stars out of 4, praised its skillful filmmaking and called it a film of pure action and kinetic energy, which is one of the most relentlessly aggressive movies ever made. While Ebert pointed out that the film does not develop its vision of a violent future world and uses only the barest possible bones of a plot, he praised its action sequences. Ebert called the climatic chase sequence unbelievably well sustained and states that the special effects and stunts are spectacular, creating a frightening, sometimes disgusting, and if the truth be told, exhilarating effect.
Ebert kind of gets it right there.
Yeah, spot on.
I mean, I think the beauty of the film is that there is very little dialogue and it doesn't need it. You know, it's a pure film of action and silence. It's almost a silent film.
In his review for the New York Times, Vincent Canbury wrote, "Never has a film's vision of the post-nuclear Holocaust world seemed quite as desolate and as brutal or as action-packed and sometimes as funny as in George Miller's apocalyptic Mad Max 2, an extravagant film fantasy that looks like a comic book come to life." And in his review for Newsweek, Charles Michener praised Mel Gibson's easy, unswaggering masculinity, saying that his hint of down-under humour may be quintessentially Australian, but is also the stuff of an international male star. The film's depiction of a post-apocalyptic future was widely copied by other filmmakers and in science fiction novels, to the point that its gritty junkyard society of the future look is almost taken for granted in the modern science fiction action film. The Encyclopedia of Science Fiction says that Mad Max 2, with all its comic strip energy and vividness, is exploitation cinema at its most inventive. Mad Max 2 was also voted the 93rd greatest film of all time by Entertainment Weekly, and they also listed Mad Max as 11th on their list of the all-time coolest heroes in pop culture. So let's just wrap this up with our traditional Brose 5-star review system. And
we're all about tradition here.
And so who am I starting with?
We're going to start with Andrew.
Andrew.
I'm up, am I?
You are.
All right.
You didn't see that coming, did you?
No. Jeez. Shock me, why don't you? I love this film. It's one of my favourites. As I said at the start, one of the greatest Australian films ever made. Just for, it's palpable action, it's comic book roots, and it's, classic Australian sense of humour. There's just a perfect blend there of all those elements. It's like our version of Indiana Jones or The Man with No Name, Clint Eastwood, John Rambo. He is one of the great iconic heroes of cinema. And I'd highly recommend the film. Every time I watch it, it's just so enjoyable. So, it'd be a 5. A straight 5. Flush.
Wow, nice.
Wow. Yeah.
And highly recommended.
Cop
no,
that.
It's a 5-star film. Don't recommend it.
Don't see it.
I'm going to give 4 stars without question. It's one of the greatest Australian films ever made, but beyond that, it's just a great film. If you've not seen any Mad Max films, see this one. See this one first. See this one before you see Fury Road. See this one before you see the first or the third one. This brings you straight into the world. Mel Gibson is in great form in this film. The script is really tight, and it's a nice little moment. It's like a little snapshot in Max's post-apocalyptic journey that we get to drop in and have a look at, and it's well worth a look. The sense of humour, like Andrew said, is great. Bruce Spence offers great comic relief in this film, and even the attitude in the compound is great. You get Sid Halen's in there, and that guy's more Aussie than the Aussie flag, and it's a beautiful, just a beautiful example of how great cinema can be. Check it out.
Good stuff, Matt.
5 stars.
Whee.
Yeah, count them. I think that's my first 5-star film. I think it is. Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I echo what everyone has said so far. I'll add on to it. I just love that it's a great hero in Max. I think Humongous is a great villain. I love that he's my favourite hockey mask wearing
villain.
Villain, yeah. I mean, this predates Jason wearing a hockey mask by a year, I think, because it wasn't until Friday the 13th 3 that he started wearing it.
You're right. I was just about to say, when was Friday the 13th?
No, it was before this, but it wasn't until number 3 started wearing it. And it's everything about this film is just always a pleasure to watch. It's simple, and it always, when I say it feels like you get through it quickly, I mean that in a good way. It's not a short film. It just feels real good to watch it every time. 5 stars,
fantastic. Okay, this film never fails to impress. It's more advanced than its predecessor, toning down on the dialogue and focusing on the action. It also utilises Mel Gibson's youthful, heroic image really well, but in specific without a cliche. Yeah. Which I think is really, really, really important and really works in its favour. He's a really wonderful hero and creation, and I think that's iconic. It's a marvel to watch this film with all the rapid cuts and the action and all the car stunts. But Mad Max 2 just has as much to say about human behaviour and industrialisation as it does about fast cars. So Miller keeps the picture moving along really nicely at quite a force. The photography by Dean Semler is first class. The editing is super tight. And Brian May's music is stirring. It's all fantastic. With a much bigger budget, more spectacular stunts than the first film, this is undoubtedly the best film in this series. I would say. So it's a classic action film representative of cinema at its purest. So, yes, I'm giving it 4 stars and highly recommend it, definitely. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps it up, guys. Thanks for coming out and talking about Mad Max 2. We will look at Beyond Thunderdome and Fury Road in the coming weeks as well, Brose, to wrap it up nicely.
Absolutely.
With a big bow. And in the next episode, we're going to be looking at Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Which, yeah, is an interesting film, to, as we've mentioned before on the podcast, but Terminator and Mad Max have a lot more in common than you would think. So watching them together this time around, and I've watched those 4 films, Terminator 1 and 2 and Mad Max 1 and 2 in close proximity, there's a lot of parallels, so it's quite interesting, and obviously the influences we've discussed today. So
I'm certainly going to go to Eagle Leather and purchase some goods there tonight.
There you go.
Yeah.
Make sure you do. I want to see you leathered up and ready to go.
Eagle Leather should really be paying us for this.
They should sponsor this Mad Max episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But
nice work,
Adam, this has been good fun. This has been a great episode. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Stay in touch with us by visiting realchat.com.au. Check us out on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at realchatpodcast, Instagram real_chat_podcast. And if you haven't already, catch up with past episodes and subscribe to new episodes on iTunes.